Hey guys, MrPokke here, back with another video, and on today's episode of Early Access Review, we are going to be taking a look at the latest Lightning 4-star hunt character, Moze, right? A lot of people have been thinking, how is his value when you're going to be pairing him up with facial? How is he going to be using up against follow-up team comps? Is he going to be working as a hyper carry, all the kind of stuff? So today we are going to be able to unpack that, right? But we jump into his character kits, Lightcone, Relics, Eidolons, team comps, as well as his actual endgame performance, right? So without further ado, let's get into today's content.
Subscribe!
So starting off with his character kit, just to kind of quickly summarize what Moze does, he is basically like an alternative version of March 7th the Hunt, which is looking to act as like a support slash pseudo DPS for a follow-up team comp. This is going to be mainly tied to his talent, Cascading Featherblade, which is where majority of his utility is going to be coming from. Not only does he have pretty decent follow-up attack frequency himself, he also has a 25% follow-up damage vulnerability, right? And as I mentioned, vulnerability debuffs, they are always going to be very valuable, which is why Topaz is going to be so good. In my previous early access review video, I mentioned, in my opinion, Faye Xiao's best in-slot teammate is probably going to be Topaz, Robin, and Aventurine. But if you do not have Topaz, I think Moze is going to be an excellent choice. As to is Moze better or is March 7 better, I think I'm going to be able to leave you guys up to see for yourselves when it comes to his actual performance. Name of the game for Moze is basically the moment you use his skill, he becomes like untargetable. He basically does not exist, and then he will like come out or like appear every single time whenever 3 points of his charge is going to be consumed, right? So he basically acts like a, I don't know, like a summon unit. He basically does not exist on the field, right? Which is a pretty interesting mechanic, right? So jumping straight into his kit, basic attack, not too much to talk about, we're just going to ignore this. Jumping straight into the skill, marks the target as prey, dealing lightning damage and gains 9 points of charge. Now the mechanics of the prey as well as charge, I'm going to be mentioning them in the talent, which is going to be right here, Cascading Featherblade. Moze will enter into departed state while a prey exists on the field, and after allies attack the prey, Moze will deal 1 instance of additional lightning damage equal to 30% of his attack and consumes 1 charge. For every 3 charge consumes, he launches 1 follow-up attack to the prey, dealing lightning damage equals to 160% of his attack. And when you reach 0, the cycle resets and then you have to cast the skill again. So essentially, this just means that Moze can launch a follow-up attack 3 times from the 9 charges. So once you cast his skill, you can do the follow-up attack 3 times before you have to cast the skill again, for a total of a pretty much 480% multiplier. There's also going to be 9 additional hits, because every single time you get additional hits at 30%, there's going to be another 270% multiplier. So basically, Moze's skill, he has a combined total of a 750% multiplier after using the skill, provided that every single one of those charges are consumed. Keep in mind that the additional damage, which is the 30% hits, they are not hyped, which means that they are not going to be receiving any benefits from like lightning damage bonus or follow-up damage bonus, and it will not count as a separate attack. It is basically just this additional line of damage that will pop out on the field, right? So it's a very flat additional damage, and each follow-up attack will also generate 10 energy, so Moze can gain a total of 60 energy from using a skill plus 3 different follow-up attacks. So that is essentially how his talent works. You press a skill, he disappears from the battle, he can't be targeted, he can't be killed, none of the thing can happen, and then he will just appear as this like external entity that will do 3 follow-up attacks, and then you have to cast his skill again, right? So that's pretty much it. And then jumping into his ultimate dash in, there's a 120 energy cost, 270% damage multiplier, as well as launching his talent's follow-up attack against the same target. If the target is defeated, then it will activate against a random target. So pretty straightforward, but just keep in mind, because the ultimate does launch another follow-up, he will regenerate 15 energy instead of the 5 energy from most units' ultimate, right? And then finally, Moze's technique Beta Wings, after using technique, gains stealth for 20 seconds, and you cannot be detected by enemies, which is basically like Scylla's technique, and increases the damage Moze deals by 30% when they enter into the combat by attacking enemies in stealth mode. You are pretty much not going to be using this at all when you're going to be running with facial, because facial will be the one initiating. But if you are going to be running with like a Moze carry, or if Moze is the only one that's going to be attacking, then you are going to be using this, right? So that is pretty much it for Moze's Rav kit. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple once you really understand the gist of it. Alright, and then jumping into his 3 main traces. Trace number 1, Night Feather, recovers 1 skill point after using the talent's follow-up attack, and this effect can be triggered again after 1 turn. This is pretty much triggered every single time Moze uses his skill, provided he does use a follow-up attack, so that we can remain skill point neutral. So Moze's entire kit essentially is just his skill and his talent, he will pretty much never basic attack. So adding on this talent, make sure that you don't consume too many skill points for the rest of your Followup team comps, right? And then for your traits number 2, Daggerful, when Moze is no longer in the departed state, his action value is advanced by 20%, and at the start of each wave, Moze's action is also advanced by 30%. This is pretty much just to make sure, in case you don't do a 0 cycle, there's like 1, 2, or 3 cycles, you want to make Moze be the very first unit that starts first to cast his skill and mark the target, and then you can do additional damage to the target, right? And then last trace, Venge wise, when this character deals damage with his ultimate, it is considered as a follow-up and increased follow-up damage taken by the enemy mark as prey by 25%. So this is pretty much, like I mentioned just now, the follow-up damage vulnerability, and it does count as a debuff, so it will help our units like Doctor Ratio, right? The prey state, it also counts as a debuff, which means that Moze by himself can apply 2 different debuffs. Jumping into his minor traces, honestly really good for a 4-star. 37.3% crit damage, 18% attack, and 10% HP. That is essentially how Moze's kit is going to be functioning. And just a little bit of a quick note as to how Moze's mechanics work. So first of all, let's just talk about this whole departed state, which means he's not going to be in combat anymore. So while Moze is going to be in departed state, he cannot be targeted by any abilities, including from our allies, right? Can't heal Moze, as well as the fact that your enemies also cannot target Moze, right? He also cannot be targeted by Ting skill or ultimate while in the departed state. However, any zone or field aura type buffs, such as Robin's skill, Robin's ultimate, or Rame's ultimate, all these kind of buffs can in fact work on Moze. Now, one interesting thing is that Huo's ultimate actually does target all allies, but Moze cannot be targeted, so he is unable to receive energy from Pokke, which is a little bit of a shame, right? This, however, doesn't mean that you should not use them together, since you can still play around by delaying Huo's ultimate until Moze returns back on the field, right? That is going to be essentially how the departed state works. Another mechanic is that for any of your buffers, right, your Ting Yun or your Bronya who wants to cast a skill, you can still cast all of your buffs on Moze before he disappears from the field, and then he will retain the buffs. So for example, if you target Moze with a Ting Yun's attack buff or ultimate buff, he will retain those buffs while he's off field, but you just can't target him when he's already off field. However, when he is using his skill, it will count as his turn ends after using the skill. So one-turn buffs such as Bronya's skill will not persist him for the rest of the follow-up attacks. However, Sparkle's buff does in fact work because, you know, the buff lasts until the start of the unit's next turn, right? So that's gonna be one thing. Now, one interesting mechanic is that when Moze is no longer on the field, which is in the departed state, since he cannot be targeted by the enemies, he will basically redistribute the taunt value to his allies. So for example, if you're running a Fei Xiao, Moze, Adventure, and Robin team comp, the taunt chance is going to be as follows: 18.75%, 18.75%, 37.5%, and 25%. Now, when Moze disappears, this entire taunt value is thrown out of the equation. So now it becomes a 23% for Fei Xiao, 46.2% for Adventure, and 30.8% for Robin. So just something for you guys to know. One more thing is going to be that Moze redirecting hits to allies for energy while his energy sufficient himself, especially if you get Moze's E1, is pretty nice, but it can also have some downside. So for example, Adventuring will basically lose 1 potential blind bet points from AoE attacks, since Moze cannot be attacked. Because if the enemy targets 4 targets, he can now only target 3, so that is 1 point lesser for Adventuring, right? At the end of the day, I would say, generally speaking, treat Moze as like a support instead of a DPS, because majority of the time he's kind of like this. I don't really know why I say this. He's kind of like a pet system, right? You use his skill, he's gone, he appears 3 times, and then you have to cast his skill again, right? So very straightforward, interesting mechanic. And his personal damage, from what I've seen so far, I wouldn't say it's the most insane thing ever, unless you're playing like a hyper carry Moze. At this point, you guys are probably wondering the differences between Moze and Han March 7th. It is almost like a light and dark comparison, yin and yang. I would say that they are both very similar in a sense where their main utility is going to be in the form of a follow-up supporter, right? They are not really be there as the main DPS unless you really want to play hyper carry, but generally speaking, they are there to support your main follow-up DPS. So in this case, it could be Fei Xiao, it could be Topaz, it could be Doctor Ratio. They are there to support your allies. For Han March 7th, I would say personally, I think she was a little bit more comfortable to play, solely because of the reason that she is a lot more skill point positive compared to Moze. Moze is a completely skill point neutral unit, so you you don't really have as much luxury as compared to if you're going to be using Hun March 7. For a DPS perspective, I would say that Moze offers more to the table when it comes to his 25% follow-up damage vulnerability, especially if you unlock Moze's E2. But I'm going to be getting into the Eidolon segment. As of when it stands right now, I feel that Moze's damage threshold is higher than Hun March 7, but the overall comfort and the ease of use, I think players might find themselves enjoying Hun March 7 a little bit more, right? So that is gonna be my personal opinion. So jumping into Moze's Lightcone segment, I believe that it's pretty straightforward. There's really only two different ways. One is a Lightcone which buffs your entire team's DPS, and that's gonna be Topaz Signature Lightcone, and the rest of the options are pretty much gonna be buffing Moze's personal DPS, right? So Worrisome Blissful, in my opinion, is definitely gonna be his best in slot, especially in the optimal setup. If you are running him with Facial or any other DPS, then Moze is gonna be running Worrisome Blissful for the absolute highest team damage. But for his personal damage, or if you don't really have another Worrisome Blissful, Baptism of Pure Thought is going to be the highest personal damage increase. It works with his kit perfectly, and it does have a lot of follow-up attack damage, right? Other than this, Sword Play, Cruise, and Stellar Sea, they're all very decent alternatives. Sword Play specifically works very, very well for Moze because he has a lot of hits in his follow-up attack, and it will immediately stack Sword Play all the way to the maximum stack, right? So very, very good to go. And that's pretty much it for Moze's Lightcone. Then when it comes to Moze's Relic recommendations, honestly, it's very similar to a lot of our other follow-up attack units. You can run the 4-piece Valerius, 4-piece Prisoner, because the target does have the debuff from the Prey, as well as the 25% follow-up damage vulnerability, right? You can also run the classic Ash Blazing Grand Duke, because like I mentioned, Moze's follow-up attack does have a lot of hits, right? So any of these 4 pieces, they are absolutely going to work with Moze. For his planar ornaments, do run Inner Salsoto Izumo exactly like how you build Facial, so not too much to be said over there. For our main stat is going to be crit rate or crit damage with attack percentage boots, damage percentage sphere, as well as attack percentage rope. The reason why we're not running Moze with a speed boots is because his personal speed is completely irrelevant, since all his damage comes from his follow-up attacks triggering when your allies hit the target. And since Moze does have a free action value advance from his talent, you don't really need speed boots to make sure that Moze is the first one to go, right? So attack boots is going to be the best in slot. Crit rate or crit damage, crit rate is going to be a little bit easier for our players since we do have 37% crit damage from his tracers alone, but it really depends on your substats, right? Then for our substats, like I mentioned, crit damage over attack percentage, very straightforward, very easy. And finally, we are going to be coming into Moze's Eidolon segment. Now for Moze, in my opinion, there is pretty much only one really important Eidolon, and that's gonna be his Eidolon 2 Rev Bearer, right? But let's just talk about the rest of the Eidolon first. First one being Oathkeeper. After entering battle, Moze regenerates 20 points of energy, and every single time the additional damage from his talent is triggered, Moze regenerates 2 points of energy. So like I mentioned, the additional damage is gonna be able to trigger up to 9 times, so you do get another 18 energy. It does not, however, warrant an energy regeneration rope, and because Moze's ultimate is really not his main gimmick anyways, you do want to just stick to the attack percentage rope, and it will basically just make his ultimate cycle come up 1 turn earlier, right? So that's gonna be that. And then the main thing, however, is gonna be with Moze's Rev Bearer. Increased crit damage inflicted by allies against enemy targets marked as prey by 40%. So once you unlock Moze's Eidolon 2, that's where, in my opinion, his entire kit pretty much outshines March 7's damage amplification by an entire margin, because March 7 is pretty much going to be 60% crit damage, and now Moze will have 40% crit damage and a 25% follow-up damage vulnerability. So Moze's E2 is absolutely very important, much more important than the rest of Eidolons. For the rest of the Eidolons, including Eidolon 1, it mainly just ties to Moze's personal damage output. You can see from his E4, after using ultimate, damage dealt by Moze increased by 30% for 2 turns. Pretty decent addition. Maybe you might need to get rid of the mobs, so not too much to be said over there. And then for his Eidolon 6 Faith Binder, increased damage multiplier of our follow-up attack by 25%, which basically increases his overall damage. But in my opinion, at the end of the day, Moze's function is still gonna be remaining as a follow-up attack supporter, right? The main dish is still gonna be depending on your main DPS follow-up damage, be it facial or doctor ratio, right? So Moze is gonna be there to support. All this additional damage, it might not be the most important, but it absolutely will impact you if you're thinking about like, oh, the enemy was 1 hit away, and maybe all these additional damage multipliers can let you get rid of the enemy, right? So it is quite nice, but I would say that the most important Eidolon for Moze is gonna be his Eidolon 2, right? So that's gonna be that. And now we can finally talk a little bit about Moze's team comps. Now, from all of my testing, I think the most interested question you guys are asking is Moze gonna be suitable for facial, especially if players don't have a Topaz? The answer is absolutely. I think he is a very, very decent alternative to Topaz. Topaz might be a little bit better, but as you guys can see from the footage later on, we still managed to get a Zero Cycle featuring the Facial, Moze, Robin, and Ventrine team comp, right? So excellent alternative. However, I do want to say that there are also some alternative considerations that you can think of if you want to use Moze. So for one example is that you can in fact pair up Moze with other Followup DPS such as Dr. Ratio, and you will find that his performance really does not falter too far behind, especially for Dr. Ratio, since Moze himself applies 2 different debuffs without relying on any Eidolons or signature Lightcone, right? This is unlike Topaz, who would need her E1 S1 to ensure that Dr. Ratio gets the 100% probability for his Followup, whereas Moze, you already get these 2 debuffs right from the get-go. So very decent teammate for Dr. Ratio. Another team comp that I kind of thought of, which is basically, what about a team without Robin? In this case, it's gonna be Facial, Topaz, Moze, and Ventrine. This team comp was actually a lot more fun than I could have thought. You basically have an almost infinite uptime on all of your Followup attacks, and they all really synergize with one another almost perfectly in this rotation, right? Super synergistic, even without Robin's action value advance. This triple DPS team comp definitely surprised me by quite a bit, and I would say that in this point, Moze as the 3rd DPS for a triple DPS setup, he does offer a lot more compared to Dr. Ratio or even March 7th, because Moze's kit is synergistic with other Followup units, mainly from his 40% crit damage from his E2 as well as the 25% Followup damage vulnerability. So not only is he contributing towards the Followup triggers from his skill, he is also contributing towards the absolute highest damage threshold, which will be affecting all of our Followup attacks, right? So that is why this triple DPS team comp was also very decent for Moze. And one last team comp that you can kind of think of is gonna be Moze as a hyper carry. This Moze hyper carry is pretty much gonna be the Facial equivalent. So you basically swap out Facial, drop in Moze. You're running Moze, Topaz, Robin, and Ventrine, right? So these 4 units also, in my opinion, found a pretty successful run. And I think at this point, at the end of the day, I feel that the general kit of Moze, it is pretty much mainly going to be tied to your Followup attack team comps, whether it be a hyper carry, whether it be a triple DPS, dual DPS. As long as you are running the Followup outtime with Moze, you are going to be finding decent success. If you are not running Followup units, then I really don't think you need to consider building him at all, and that is going to be that for Moze's team comps. So now jumping straight into the endgame performance, I'm mainly going to be showing you guys some memory of Chaos Clear. So this is going to be the Facial, Moze, Robin, and a Ventrine team comp, right? So as you can see, at the start of the battle, we are going to instantly cast our skill, and you can see that Moze is completely off the map. He can't be targeted by allies, he can't be targeted by enemies, he's just going to be disappearing. And whenever we get 3 stacks down, you can see 6 out of 9, we get 1 additional Followup from Moze, and the next one is going to be coming at 3 out of 9, and then 0 out of 9, so on and so forth. You can see that Facial's ultimate damage is going to be at a whopping 388,000 with Robin's buff, so honestly is a very decent alternative even if you don't have Topaz, right? So this is gonna be Facial coming in, and Moze is gonna be able to cast his skill once again later on, or we are gonna be trying to save our skills later on for the second half. So here we have another example of Facial's burst that you can kind of expect with Moze as the support instead of Topaz. So you can see over here, we are gonna be getting the Followup hit, and then Facial is gonna get ultimate, dealing a whopping 300 and 452,000 damage, completely one-shotting Kafka and having quite a bit of overkill. So you can see that Moze's performance as Facial substitute is honestly very nice, right? And eventually we are going to be able to get the 0 cycle as Facial, Moze, Robin. We are very comfortable, still have Robin's ultimate, saving everything up, and then now we can cast Moze's ultimate into Facial's ultimate into all of the ultimates. So a very comfortable 0 cycle, even if we do not use Topaz for a Facial team. So very nice finishing move. That is gonna be our 0 cycle. Now another example I kind of want to show you guys is basically a Facial, Topaz, Moze, and a Ventrine team comp without the use of Robin. So this team comp, like I mentioned just now, it was honestly a lot of fun, much more fun than I initially anticipated, even without Robin's incredible buffs as well as the triple action value advance, right? So this team essentially is just spamming all of your Followup attacks and getting all of the debuffs stack onto a single target, and then we just nuke the shit out of the target using Facial's ultimate as well as Moze's ultimate for a little bit of an amplification, right? So now you can see Moze and Topaz, they are both applying their debuffs on the same target. We are going to be dealing pretty decent damage even without Robin. Going for the Followup roughly at 40,000, very nice over there, and the target is really almost dead. Facial pretty much taking away the target. We don't even need Face Out's ultimate, and then the horse is gonna die, and we now have 12 seconds of Face Out ready to go. Once the mob is gonna be deleted, then we can apply all of our stuff together. Now Topaz, our Debt Collector, is going to be on the same target. Moze's skill, once we apply it, is also going to be on the same target. Get the prey mark on the target. And then Facial is going to go ahead and use her ultimate to just basically absolutely demolish him. Going for the skill into a follow-up into an ultimate, just generating a little bit more stacks there for our second half, right? So you can see here, a lot of follow-ups can be triggered from our team, and this is at this point very overkill damage, but you can see that we can still do a pretty decent 314,000 even if we do not have Robin in our team. So now we are going to be up against Kafka. Moze applying the skill, applying the prey mark onto Kafka, and we are basically targeting all of our debuffs on the same target. Moze, Aventure's ultimate, Topaz skill, everybody is going to be aiming on Kafka, and then we apply all of them together. Facia is going to go in for a very nice 287,000 damage even before Kafka's weakness broken, so that's very cool. Then kind of see towards the end, we are going to be able to deal enough damage. Kafka is going to be removed, and we still have a little bit of turn. You can see we basically have nothing left, and then we have all of the ultimates coming in, even though we literally have no action value remaining. Casting a Moze's ultimate into a Moze follow-up into an facial ultimate, and you can see we just managed to get this barely at the edge of our teeth, literally with zero action value remaining, and we get ourselves a 0 cycle, right? So honestly, a pretty fun team comp that you guys can attempt yourself, but in my opinion, I think the Robin team comp is definitely still a lot more comfortable, with a lot more room for stronger enemies in the future, because this was really at the edge of the seats, down to the last AV. And then another thing I kind of want to show you guys is going to be Moze featuring Dr. Ratio instead of Facial to kind of see his performance, because like I mentioned, Moze's kit, he does provide 2 different debuffs for the target, so Dr. Ratio will pretty much get his 100% follow-up chance even without Topaz, right? In fact, it is even easier to get 100% follow-up compared to Topaz, and he doesn't even have to be a debuffer like Pella, right? So very nice. Robin is gonna be doing Robin's thing. Moze is gonna be going here and casting his ultimate, and all of the damage is roughly gonna be around this ballpark, 91,000 into a 50,000. Very decent damage, if I can say so myself. Dr. Ratio going for his skill into another follow-up. Moze's follow-up destroying the target before Dr. Ratio even needs to cast his ultimate or his basic attack, and then we can apply our ultimate onto the horse, and now we can pretty much just get rid of him very comfortably with our follow-up attacks from Eventually. So unfortunately, it is not going to be quite enough for a 0 cycle, but we are going to be able to quite comfortably get the 1 cycle clear here. Getting our Dr. Ratio ultimate, getting our Adventuring ultimate, and all of our follow-ups is going to come crashing down into Kafka. Look at that. Adventuring into Dr. Ratio, into Moze, back into Dr. Ratio again, and then we have enough for another Dr. Ratio, and to another follow-up into another ultimate. It is just very satisfying to see all of these follow-up chain attacks happening all together, right? The true essence of a follow-up team comp. So I would say that is going to be performance of Moze with Dr. Ratio as well. And then one final thing for kind of the interested players is going to be our hyper carry Moze team comp featuring Moze, Topaz, Robin, and Aventuring, right? So this is pretty much you take out Facial, slot in Moze. So if you're not going to be pulling for Facial, you want to save your pulls for Lingsha, but you did get a couple of copies of Moze, you could consider trying this team comp if you do have the necessary follow-up pieces, right? Keep in mind, this is going to be Memory of Chaos 11, not Memory of Chaos 12, just for the Lightning Weak enemies. And we are going to be able to get all of our buffs here, and we want to see how much damage we are going to be getting from Moze, especially with Nambi and Proof of Death and all that kind of stuff, right? So damage is coming in, getting the AoE. We do get a little bit of defense reduction from the Trotter. Unfortunately, Topaz is going to get a little bit low, but not too crazy. Into another follow, I can kind of see over here, the damage is honestly quite considerable. 127,000 from a Nambi into 45,000 from Moze. So at this point, I think it might not necessarily be accurate to call this as a hyper carry Moze setup, because honestly, Topaz and Nambi, they're also dealing a ridiculous amount of damage, right? So I guess a more accurate way of saying this would be basically Moze plus another follow-up that is not Dr. Ratio, right? At the end of the day, this is still pretty much the same as a follow-up team comp. Pause for a little bit. One last target remaining, Adventuring, probably ultimate with Topaz Proof of Death, with Nambi, all of the stuff. Nambi going in and finally getting the clear. So that's going to be a very nice 0 cycle for like quote-unquote a hyper carry Moze setup. And with that, we have come to the end of Moze's early access review. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I think it was honestly a lot more fun than I expected, especially for a 4-star unit. And if you guys don't have Topaz, I highly recommend building him for your facial or even follow-up team comps, right? So word of the day is gonna be talent. But join YouTube, join Twitch, join Discord. All the best for facial, all the best for Moze pools, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.